Welcome to the Astrology Star Sisters Talk over tea. Mars conjunct Uranus fireworks. And my guest today is Madam Simon. Hi Simon, how you doing?
Pretty good. Glad to be on the show again. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm so glad that you could come back, and I enjoy having you, and it seems like the people that watch, they seem to enjoy you too. So let's get to what we're going to talk about today.
Okay.
So to get a hold of Madam Simon, her website is iconalchemy.com, and her email is madamsimon at iconalchemy.com, and my website is alightpath.com, and we both love to hear from you. So today we're talking about Mars conjunct Uranus, and Algo is really close there too, and they're all in Taurus.
Yeah.
And this happens on July 15th at 7:05 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time in Seattle. And it's circled here on the chart in an orange color for everybody to observe. So Mars conjunct Uranus happens about every 2 years, sometimes a little bit less than 2 years. The last conjunction was on August 1st of 2022 at 18 degrees Taurus and 42 minutes. The next conjunction is July 3rd of 2026 at 3 degrees of Gemini and 52 minutes. So we're going to talk about the Sabian symbol of where that conjunction is taking place. And Sabian symbols were channeled in 1925 by spiritualist medium Elsie Wheeler and with the assistance of astrologer Mark Edmund Jones. And they are a symbolic image for each degree of the zodiac. So do you want to talk about 20, because we round up the number to 27. Do you want to talk about that, Simon?
Well, hmm, it's interesting. I like the keynote that is associated with the symbol. We're seeing it as, quote, an old Indian woman selling the artifacts of her tribe to passersby with the keynote of peaceful adaptation to collective needs, which I think is really fascinating given the more disruptive qualities associated with what is actually being conjoined at this degree. Um, so that's interesting. It's kind of a nice, potential little bit of mitigation. um, but I do kind of find it interesting because we can certainly look at that as okay, take that keynote at face value. Um, but do keep in mind that this this image of an Indian woman selling the artifacts of her tribe to passersby could be taken a bit as that she is in a position of um, needing to support herself and her tribe, but it's in the wake of colonialism. So while this image might look pretty on the surface, um, I am a little concerned about what its implications are, um, because it's one thing to sell the crafts that we make, to sell beautiful objects that we make, just because we want other people to have them, as well as to be able to support ourselves. But it's another thing if one is forced by circumstances to sell off cultural treasures. And so, yeah, there's a weird dichotomy here.
Yeah, and it talks about the adjustments. So, yeah, I always think of that. At first, when I read it years ago, I always thought of it as she was selling her crafts, but then it's like, no, it says artifacts. So that is, kind of a strange thing, because why would you sell artifacts. I think of artifacts being in a museum or held, in some safe space for generations to come to observe them.
Right. And so that then suggests to me that there is a question here of what portions of our cultural legacy do we keep, and what are we being forced to part with?
Mm-hmm. Well, and it also makes me wonder, like, is she the last surviving of her tribe?
Oof, right. That's a whole other
Right.
not pleasant potential.
Okay, we're going to look at Mars a little bit here. Mars rules the signs of Aries and Scorpio. It rules the head, surgery, and the knife, usually in surgery to, do the surgery. Blood, bone marrow, inflammation. It's action, assertive, courage, initiative, passion, determination, and drive. And the caution would be excess, chaos, aggression, conflict, and hot tempered. Anything you'd like to add?
Impulsiveness. Mars is very strong in my chart, so I have to put that out there that there can be associated with Mars this tendency to make snap decisions. Snap decisions that you haven't. It's not simply a mental snap decision. It's more a matter of just like this a bodily impulse almost, that you are going with that instinctive drive and yeah, not thinking too clearly about it. And then have to deal with the consequences afterward.
Well, and I don't think Mars thinks things through always, so.
Oh, heavens no. And I mean, think about it. In terms of, when we are being decisive in certain situations, that is absolutely necessary to not get caught up in thought about it. If you're going to rush into a burning building in order to save a child, you are not going to sit there and carefully mull it over. You're going to either do or not do. And that's it.
Right, and that's generally a good time to be, impulsive and do something.
Right.
Okay, Uranus rules the sign of Aquarius in modern astrology, and it rules astrology. It rules the nervous system, the chemical balance, and seizures. It's sudden, unexpected changes, freedom, eccentric, genius, originality, and the caution is rebelliousness to an extreme, because rebellious could be a positive too. Um, Antisocial, impatient, and disruption. Anything you want to add?
So, Uranus is very much associated with science in terms of things like breakthroughs. It can be associated with technology in general because there's a bit of more than a bit. There's that association with electricity, as we see actually with regard to its association with the nervous system. So there's that bioelectrical um, association, and then simply electricity in relation to technology. And I very much associate Uranus with that electric quality. It is not simply sudden, unexpected change; it's sudden, shocking change. Um, so yeah, there's that kind of there's definitely speed. There can be insight, um, brilliant insight. It does not tend to be emotional. Um, it's also it correlates with dissociation. There is a detached quality about Uranus. Um, yeah, it's Uranus can be. And the thing is, I mean, it's neither good nor bad surprises, right? I mean, it can be either one or sometimes both combined. It's definitely associated with what is strange. It's kind of the weirdo planet. It rotates on its side. Um, I have Uranus at my ascendant. So again, I have a lot of Uranian qualities. So it's definitely the dyed in the wool weirdo is Uranus.
And one of our audience wrote in, big week ahead for sure. The world is already on fire. So that's very interesting. I like that. So thank you for your comment. Okay, so then we're going to go on to Taurus. It's a fixed earth sign. The key phrase is I have. It's ruled by Venus. It rules the neck, throat, thyroid, ears, and sugar. It's artistic, love, beauty, reliable, and enjoys comfort. And the caution is stubborn, jealous, materialistic, and overindulgent. Want to add anything?
So, Taurus, I like to say, is the roots of the mountain going down into the planet. And so it is very stable and very change averse. And so having Uranus in Taurus has been a bit strange and intense and disruptive for the past several years. When Uranus went into Taurus, literally the day of that ingress, if I remember correctly, Kilauea erupted. And so Uranus in Taurus is associated with earthquakes. We indicated that Uranus can be sudden change, right? But it's in a sign like Taurus, sudden is seismic. Sudden is is having to literally move the mountain in order to make that change. And what happens when mountains move? We have earthquakes, avalanches, volcanoes, that kind of thing. And so it can feel like that in terms of what has been our relationship with our resources, with our material resources, and our survival needs, which is what Taurus is also really associated with.
Right. And Taurus doesn't like to move too fast. They're kind of slow and take their time. And we have another audience member from Arizona, and they have an Aquarius sun, so they can relate to Uranus. Okay, and with this conjunction, we have a Thor's hammer. We have Uranus, Mars, and the fixed star Algol all together, and they're making a sesquiquadrate to the south node and to Pholus and Ceres. And the south node and Pholus and Ceres are in a square to each other. So do you want to speak on that, Simon?
So a Thor's hammer puts a lot of pressure on the planets that are at the apex. In this case, that is Mars and Uranus and the fixed star Algol. And the square aspect that is at the base is already something that feels challenging. The south node can be where we are comfortable, what we already know, where we've come from, what we've already experienced. But it also can relate to letting go. And so I kind of feel like, especially when it's squaring Ceres, it can literally be letting go of what previously felt nurturing to us, what previously felt helpful for feeding our hungers, for for taking care of our creature comforts. Ceres in Capricorn has this achievement orientation, that we hunger to achieve within the status quo, that we hunger for, yes, some material stability, but also for the with regard to the ability to achieve status within the hierarchy, within the social hierarchy. It's very goal oriented. And so when I'm seeing that square there, it's like, oh no, you need to let go of what you thought were your goals that were going to keep you safe and that were going to establish your position within the status quo. And instead, where is that pressure going from that square? It's going toward that Mars Uranus Algol conjunction, with Mars, of course, being our action, right? So we're being pressured to take action, except we're being pressured to take action in a way that is being heavily influenced by Uranus, and these transcendental outer planets. When they touch a personal planet like Mars, it's often not particularly gentle or like easy. They transform that planet from the ground up. Okay. It's like you're experiencing, especially in the case of Uranus, an alien invasion. Okay. And in this case, it's that taking over of how are you acting, and particularly how are you acting with regard to your material resources and your sense of what secures your survival needs. And I think that because Algol is there, there's a serious potential for people to get kind of panicky, unfortunately. Thor's hammers can give us a survival level fear if we're not careful. And so the real key here, the Fixed Star Algol is associated with losing your head. It is the blinking demon star, which is it's a binary star system where one star that is a little darker than the other goes in front of the other at intervals, and so it makes it look like it blinks. And that star system is in it's the eye of the head of the Medusa in the Perseus constellation. Okay, so it has those associations with Medusa. And Medusa is related to a grave. She became the Medusa because of a grave injustice, raped by Poseidon. She was a priestess of Pallas Athena, goddess of wisdom. And Athena then turns her into this creature with these snakes for hair and the ability to turn what she looked at to stone. And there are certainly those who would be like, why'd she get punished when Poseidon was the one who committed the crime? But in that system, Athena knew she couldn't punish Poseidon. He's one of the big gods, So instead, she gives Medusa the power to protect herself, the power to unleash vengeance upon anyone who would try to harm her again. And yes, after she'd, kind of suffered for a while with that experience, then Athena's the one who counseled Perseus as to how to kill her. And Medusa's head then has become a powerful protective symbol. But that Fixed Star Algol is associated with some pretty drastic circumstances. And in particular with literal loss of, literal beheadings, as well as the figurative, people losing their heads because they're, doing crazy, stupid stuff. Okay. And so when I see Algol and Mars and Uranus all together at the apex of a Taurus hammer. I feel like there's going to be people who do lose their heads, who do some crazy stuff, and probably out of a sense of either economic fear, or a little more likely, people who feel like they are going to lose their standing within the community, within the status quo, if they don't take radical action. And so that to me looks like a doubling down by the powers that be. I mean, I certainly think there are people who could be rebelling against that. That's all well and good, but I don't feel like it's that if people are taking hostile action, for example, that it's actually a defensive move, for, say, people's rights. Okay. I feel like it's going a little bit in the other direction, and I feel like it's up to those of us who are seeing this stuff coming, rather than to react out of fear, which is what that hammer seems to be driving us toward, to instead get calm and centered about what it is that matters most to us, what actions we can take that are stable actions in the midst of extreme change. And then recognize that Algol is not out to harm you if you haven't been up to no good. Algol is a symbol that, Athena put the head of that image of the head of the Medusa on her shield. We see many images of Medusa's head on Athena's shield or on Athena's breastplate. And so Athena is all about wisdom and being tactically minded. And so when everybody else is losing their head around you, recognize, are you there to be somebody who stands up for the rights of people who are oppressed? Are you there to be somebody who can be calm and centered, or are you going to join in the chaos? Right? You have a choice to make.
I like how you said about staring, because to me it reminds me of that, you can be unaware that somebody's in near you or in your space, and it can shock you out of doing what you're doing. And you could be doing something very innocent, but you could be doing something maybe you're not supposed to, and then just from them staring at you, sometimes it's shocking, but you stop what you're doing and change. So it feels like that can happen too. And if we just focus on the Mars and Uranus conjunction that happens every couple of years, it doesn't conjunct with Algol very often, probably every, I don't know, 100 years or something, or maybe not even that often, but, just the change and sudden, and it's in a sign that doesn't want to change. So it's like sometimes we just have to kind of be rocked off of our standing to make changes that, in hindsight, we can say, oh, this was the best thing that ever happened. But sometimes there, it's like we're a little stubborn and a little fixed, and it's like, I don't want to move from where I'm at, and I want to stand here. So
Right.
Okay, and then we have a mini grand trine on the same day, and I think Simon has some sirens going by.
Yeah. I'm in downtown Seattle, so yeah.
The fireworks, yay! We got that fire energy going there. Yeah. So Neptune is sextile to the Mars Uranus conjunction, and the sun is also sextile, and then the sun is trine to Neptune. So it makes a nice flowing little aspect there of energy. Even though Neptune has just recently turned retrograde, it's in Pisces at the 29th degree, and then the sun is in Cancer. So, a little watery feeling. So, there could be some emotions around what you might get, the shock and awe, so to speak, of coming. Do you want to speak any more of this?
There's also, I mean, since that's the sun as opposed to the moon, even though it's in a sign associated with emotions, it still has to do with what is our perception. Um, and the sun in Cancer is perceiving things from a space of being concerned about what is going to safeguard, emotionally safeguard home and family and self, um, and and also family of the heart, the people who are closest to you. So it can be a bit tribal in its associations. Um, for better or for worse. Um, but in trine with Neptune, so Neptune can fog the senses. Neptune in medical in medical astrology, in association with one of the lights, i.e., the sun or the moon, can be associated with eyesight problems. Okay. Natally, I have my sect light, the moon, trine, Neptune, and I've had glasses for the majority of my life. Um, at the same time, it can also bring us different vision, a big vision for our lives. It can be associated with dreams, to a certain extent, nocturnal dreams, but more importantly, our dreams for our lives. And so I feel like this mini grand trine is minor grand trine is associated with changing what is our vision for our lives. That when we see the chaos in the world around us, when we see the areas in which people are struggling, when we see people who need to be protected, um, and and see who is being harmed and see who benefits from that harm, when we see all of those things, then we have an opportunity to change the vision for how we will respond, to change our vision for how are we connecting with our community and supporting our community through intense and challenging times. And remember that Neptune is in Pisces there, and that is associated with both a very spiritual outlook, but also with compassion, with recognizing the interconnectedness of all life, not just human life either. Um, so yeah, I feel like it is both supporting and maybe soothing a little bit that Mars Uranus Algol conjunction, but also asking us to make a shift in response to what we experience.
Well, and it just triggered my memory that this morning we had an earthquake off of Canada on the west coast, out in the ocean. I don't know, it was 140, 150 miles off. But, with Neptune and Pisces being the ocean, it kind of made me think of that too. And we've been kind of talking about some earthquakes also. And, we're still several days from that window, but the earth is constantly moving.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we go to Mars conjunct Algol, um, about 6, 7 hours later on the same day, July 15th. So it just kind of intensifies the energy. It's kind of like playing the energy into each other. Do you want to speak to this?
So, it's interesting. We've got the Mars Uranus conjunction, and after Mars comes out of being transformed by Uranus from the ground up, okay, wholly transformed by this a transpersonal, a transcendental experience. So something that is not personal coming to what is personal. Okay. And then Mars goes like straight out of that into the conjunction with Algol. Um, And so, it goes back to what you were saying about something staring or something looking at you. Algol, this eye, this blinking eye, of the Medusa, um, looking at Mars, newly emerged from this transformation by Uranus, and said, "Hello, hello." Um, you know, are you, as you're coming out of that, what are you going to do? And do I have to turn you to stone? Do I have to turn you to stone? Or are you going to actually become a champion for the rights of the oppressed? We, especially those of us in the United States and to a certain extent Europe as well, right? We've been comfortable for a while. I mean, not all of us by a long shot, but when we're looking at the majority of folks, there has been a certain amount of comfort, which is becoming less and less comfortable with Uranus's transit of Taurus, and shifting our relationship with our material resources and shifting the landscape around us. And so now Algol is posing that question to Mars: what you gonna do about it?
I like that. And, when we have the planets conjunct each other, this is like a new cycle. So we have a Mars Uranus new cycle for the next almost 2 years. And then we have a Mars Algol new cycle for the next 2 years, or almost, because, Mars will conjunct Algol about every 2 years also. So it's not that it doesn't happen, it happens every couple of years. So it's an occurrence that happens.
Right. And that is something that's important to remember about even like these, potentially challenging transits, is that they come around again, and the sky didn't fall the last time it happened. Yes, sometimes there are intense things that happen. But thus far, it has not been the end of the world.
Well, and that next Mars Uranus conjunction will be in the sign of Gemini, because Uranus spends about 7 years in a sign. So, have 3 or 4 conjunctions per sign. So now it's moving to a new flavor or energy, so to speak.
Right.
Okay, then we have Uranus conjunct the fixed star Algol on July 20th. And what do you say about that, Simon?
Well, we started out that week, and this is like, I mean, it's like a couple weeks out from when we're recording this now, but we start out with Mars conjoining Uranus and then conjoining Algol. And then toward the end of the week, we get kind of the bookend, as Uranus conjoins Algol. And remember, I said Uranus is a transcendental planet, an outer planet. It governs generational cycles, because it moves so much slower than the personal planets, and also is not within that sort of area where all the personal planets are hanging out near the sun and near Earth. And so when we're looking at Uranus conjunct Algol, we had at the beginning of the week Mars, suddenly bumping up against Algol after having been transformed by Uranus and being asked, what are you going to do? And now Uranus conjoining Algol. Algol is looking at Uranus and saying, okay, how is a generation going to shift? How are a whole group of people, a whole planet of people going to shift? In response to this combination of energies. And so I find that really interesting. If I remember correctly, we're looking at 70 some odd years is actually Uranus's let me think. Oh, actually closer to 80 now that I think about it. Don't remember the exact number, but its orbit is, about a human lifetime, give or
84
take.
years.
There we go. And so, that, this then is a once in a lifetime transit of Uranus and Algol. What is an entire group of people going to do? What radical changes are we going to experience, and how are we going to respond to them? And are we going to respond to them collectively in a way that that helps uplift people, or that oppresses people? That's the big question. Are we going to take care of not just ourselves, but others around us? Are we going to reject, patriarchal oppression and abuse of women and children and marginalized people? Algol is protective energy, harsh but protective. And so, what happens if we choose to continue with the status quo as best we can? Of course, Uranus is going to ensure that changes come, but are they going to be kindly changes? Are they going to be just changes? Algol wants Uranus to ensure just change. And whether or not we go along with that, that's up to us. But I'm not certain that Mother Algol is going to be too kind to us if we choose to be jerks.
Well, and the last time Uranus would have been conjunct Algol would have been approximately 84 years ago. And 84 years ago, Pearl Harbor, I think it'll be 84 this year, Pearl Harbor was bombed, or maybe it's 83. But, so there was some tragic things that were going on at the time too. So, and that was, shocking that Pearl Harbor was bombed, as an example. So, it's very interesting. And, a lot of the people that would be of that age, they were young children. So how do they even give us feedback? Because they might have lived at that time, but they were so young, their view would be different. They wouldn't have a good view, I don't think so, because they were too young.
Right.
Okay, and then with this, we have another Thor's hammer. We have Uranus and Algol square to Mercury, and then Ceres is sesquiquadrate to the Mercury and the Algol and Uranus. So, another interesting. And so with these aspects, these Thor's hammers, to me, it just feels like it's, kind of putting a little bit more pressure on of change through, like you say, how are we going to deal with some of these social problems, or, homelessness is a big one. How are we going to solve that? It's not a one thing fix all, because it's a in-depth, complicated issue that's made up of several different things. So it's like very interesting that we have these going on, kind of in this, what we're calling Mars week, so to speak. Simon came up with that name. I like that, so I go with that. So would you like to share with this one?
So Uranus square Mercury then is, again, just like Uranus acted on Mars, transformed Mars. Now Uranus is endeavoring to transform Mercury. And it's it's somewhat of a tense relationship, because it's that square aspect. And Mercury in Leo is thought and speech, that can be proud, that wants to be seen, that wants to be heard, that speaks with passion. that can show up in a leadership role. But again, we're looking at, a Uranus situation. So we're looking at massive change and surprises, and things like accidents can show up. When we've got Uranus Mercury in particular, you can have things like more car accidents, or just things going sideways when it comes to Mercury topics, whether that's travel or commerce, or simple communication. Also technology. Both Uranus and Mercury have associations with information technology. So if you're a sysadmin, batten down the hatches, do things to try to make sure that your system is working well. And that's the thing with like a lot of these kinds of transits. I really want to make sure that, especially when we're discussing transits with some really intense implications, that we don't just devolve into fear and the sky is falling and I'm just going to hide inside all day and all of that. But rather to look at these as these are times that are challenging us to pay a little more attention to certain things. And so when it comes to, for example, technology, to try to be smarter about how we are working with our systems, to back up your data, just on that basic level, just like we do when Mercury retrograde is on the way. Okay. So in this case, with this Taurus hammer, now we've got the potential for communication and travel and commerce to all go sideways, to do strange things. This is expect the unexpected, right? And then that unexpectedness, whatever happens in connection with that, and it could be something as simple as tripping over a power cord and unplugging the computer and losing data because you did that, something that simple. Okay. But whatever that kind of surprise occurrence is, or potentially, people speaking out in ways that they haven't before, that's also a distinct possibility here. That puts pressure on Ceres in Capricorn. And remember, I talked about Ceres in Capricorn is where we seek to nurture ourselves and others through Capricorn means. Okay. And Capricorn is goal oriented, is practical, tends to be a bit conservative, tends to uphold the status quo, even when they're seeking big goals for themselves. Okay. And it's not necessarily that they're simply in this mode of like selfishness. There's also that need to create legacies that can help the people we care about. Okay. Liz and I are both Capricorn suns, and other planets as well. And Capricorn a lot of the time is like, can seem like kind of, a bit stodgy and stiff and all of that, but often has goals that are concerned with taking care of their families and their community and people that matter to them. And they just happen to do it in this kind of serious way. And so Ceres in that sign then is concerned with responsible nurturing. Okay. And there are, we can certainly engage in responsible nurturing when it comes to ourselves and our families, but there is that larger societal concern at work here. Anytime you have an outer planet, that's going to be part of the picture. And also Capricorn is concerned with social hierarchies and how do we navigate them. And so again, there is now this pressure to how am I meeting my needs? How am I meeting the needs of those close to me, the people I care about? How am I feeding myself and others, sometimes quite literally? Okay. within the context of a social hierarchy that now has to be reconsidered, because we see this is a retrograde situation. Okay.
I would be careful this week when you're sending emails or text messages to others that, if you have a Diane that you're sending a text message or an email, that you have the correct Diane and aren't sharing information that maybe you're not supposed to share with somebody else. Or, the name could be Mark or Bob. It kind of doesn't really matter what the name is, but I would just make sure that you send it, one, to the right person, and two, that maybe you read it before you push the send button. And,
Yeah.
I'm sure by then we'll be in the Mercury retrograde shadow too. So it's like that's another reason to, read those emails and that technology, or make sure when you get an email that, you just need to do this to your computer because it's a new update. Make sure it's sent by who it says it's sent, and not just push the button and let somebody have access to your computer when you shouldn't.
I do feel also as though this Taurus hammer can be potentially disruptive to the social hierarchy. And so you need to then consider, do I wish to disrupt the status quo or not?
And then we have a finger of God, or a yod. And we have Jupiter sextile to Venus and Vesta, which they are quincunx to Ceres. So Ceres is pretty active on this Uranus Algol conjunction. Do you want to speak to the finger of God, or yod?
Yeah, so Ceres is definitely getting a lot of pressure. And in this case, it's from two benefics, as well as Vesta. And Vesta relates to focus. Vesta is so Mars can also relate to kind of our focus, our energetic focus, but Vesta is our focus that is not covered by Mars. Okay. Vesta is the sacred flame, or the goddess. Vesta is the goddess of the sacred flame. And in the context of the Roman pantheon, was actually associated with the community space, but specifically this community space as a representative of the state. And so Vesta can be very much about what is the social order and what keeps the social order going. Okay. What is the light that shines in the heart of the social order? What is the warmth, the hearth that nurtures people within the social order? And conjoining Venus in Leo, there is a desire for connection. There is a desire for good relationships, for the finer things in life. Venus in Leo can certainly be passionate about connections. It really wants to connect from the heart. Okay. And so, I mean, that Venus Vesta conjunction is quite lovely in its way, and very hot because it's in a fixed fire sign ruled by the sun. Okay. And then it's in the sextile with Jupiter in Gemini, and air feeds fire. Jupiter in Gemini expands how we are talking. Okay. And what our philosophical takes are when we're communicating. And so that Jupiter, who loves to expand whatever he's touching, okay, is feeding the fire of that Venus in Vesta, And then all together, they're putting more pressure on poor Ceres to say, hey, we need to change how we take care of people. We need to change how we uphold the values of our society and how we are feeding people, literally how are we meeting people's practical needs, and how do we view them within the context of that social order? How do we view them within the context of that status quo? Because, if people have been relegated to the bottom of the totem pole, okay, to the bottom of the social order for so long, and are not being seen as being, as high up in the social order, and they're not getting their needs met, how is any of this, the space of the state, actually beneficial to them? And why should they care about the continuation of that state? Okay. So to get everybody on board with how you want things to run, you got to make sure that people's needs are met. If you're not doing that, then why should they care about the continuation of your system?
It's interesting. I read one article I can't remember what countries are involved, but one country was going to a 4-day work week, and another country was going to a 6-day work week. And it's like, wow, this is really interesting. One's going, from 32 hours and one's going to 48 hours. And I just thought, wow, that's pretty interesting, because, there's always a lot of talk about, how people perform and their work weeks.
So that's actually Greece that has recently made the change to a 6-day work week, and it is in connection with a more conservative government, and with kind of an austerity attitude, an attitude that the people have to kind of, tighten their belts and manage to do more with less and all of that. And we will see how it turns out. I very much am of the opinion that, as a rule, it is healthier to work smarter, not harder.
I agree.
So,
but for different countries, they might have their different reasons, so it's very interesting. Okay, and then do you want to talk about your Mars week that you named it Mars week? I like that.
I was calling it Mars week just because Mars transits, big Mars transits, bookend the week. And then there's a few little things going on during the week that are Mars oriented. Not a lot. It's at the beginning and the end of the week, really. So we're looking at on Saturday the 20th, when the Uranus Algol conjunction is happening, Mars is sextile Neptune and then enters Gemini. So we've got a Mars Gemini ingress. And then, of course, on that Sunday, the 21st, we've got the second of the Capricorn full moons with Mars trine Pluto. And then we also see, Sun trine Neptune and Mercury square Uranus, right? What we just saw at the base of that second Taurus hammer. Should also be noted, there's a couple of minor Mars transits that also happen under this Capricorn full moon. And that is Venus quintile Mars and Mars septile the North Node. And the reason I mention them is because when we've got this Mars trine Pluto, Pluto is sometimes seen as the higher octave of Mars. They're both associated with willpower. And Pluto can bring intensity. to whatever it touches. Also is transformational. So we've got, Mars is like getting hit by two outers in the same week, okay, in a way that can potentially radically change how we take action to get what we want, which is what Mars is very much about. Now, you put Mars in that quintile with Venus on the same day that Mars is trine Pluto. Venus is what we want. Venus is our desire. And then Mars is how do we get what we want. And quintiles are, they're a minor aspect. They're effectively dividing the zodiac into 5, okay, and forming a pentagram. And the Mars-Venus quintile is asserting a little bit of friction, just a little bit, not excessive, but enough to get us thinking outside of the box, to get us to engage in some creative problem solving in order to, in this case, connect what we want with how we're getting it, okay? And then that Mars is also septile the North Node, and the septiles are 7, divide the circle into 7, okay? And the North Node, sometimes referred to as the head of the dragon, okay? Both of the nodes can have this kind of almost haunted quality to them. The head of the dragon has a hungry quality to it. It is moving toward things that we don't know, but that we have a hunger to learn and to experience and to grow into, okay? And septiles are like, they're like whisperings from the hidden worlds. There's this spirit quality to them. And so it's like there is an unseen impetus connecting our drive to that forward part of our karmic arc, where we are supposed to be going, what we are supposed to be learning. And so that can really feel like there's kind of a almost like a divine impetus to now take our newly transformed will that has experienced transformation from both of these outer planets and use it to move ourselves in the right direction.
That's wonderful. So what would be your takeaway for this week of the 15th through the 20th or 21st? I would say don't be in a hurry to go anywhere. Pack your patience.
Especially with that Capricorn full moon. That's a kind of an intense Capricorn full moon, with the sun trine Neptune and that Mercury square Uranus and Mars trine Pluto. I would say don't put yourself into unnecessarily dangerous situations unless you're going in with very clear eyes and you have a purpose there, which I guess would be a necessary situation. But don't give in to the kind of recklessness of especially that Mars Uranus combination. And instead be purposeful about what you're doing, and at the same time prepared to have to adjust in case things do go sideways. It's a week that is potentially full of surprises. It's very volatile. And that means that it's important not to be kind of like going around with blinders on. And at the same time, since the sun is trine Neptune, it may be harder to see mundane things clearly. And in combination with, both Mars and Mercury having those hard aspects to Uranus, that's a recipe for accidents. That's a recipe for like, I'm kind of, daydreaming along in my usual route somewhere and not paying attention. And I get into a car accident. Okay. That's one example.
So
Um,
pay attention and be observant.
Pay attention, be observant, and be ready to adjust, to adapt quickly to changing circumstances. Um, and keep your values foremost, in terms of trying to center yourself and stabilize yourself during this time. So that, yes, you can be prepared to move and change as appropriate, but also recognizing what is most important to you and why, right? So that when you are pushed in a direction that is potentially extreme, that you can stay true to your principles and let that be your guiding light. Remember that Venus is conjunct Vesta. What is your sacred flame? What is your purpose and reason for being? And how does that connect with others? And thankfully, that Sun Neptune trine can give us some sympathy and compassion for others when they're like a little freaked out. um, but yeah, it's one powerhouse of a week.
So I would say not to be in a hurry and allow extra time to get somewhere and do what you need to do.
Definitely.
And breathe and
Definitely.
enjoy.
Yeah. Take a breath anytime things get hectic. Deep breath, calm down, and all should be well.
Well, I want to thank our audience and I want to thank Simon. And I have a quote before we end here. We all have big changes in our lives that are more or less a second chance. And that's by Harrison Ford. And we'd love for you to come back and enjoy other episodes of the Astrology Star Sisters Talk over tea and other shows coming up. I do 3 podcasts with Justin, the full moon forecast, the monthly astrology forecast, and a Chiron asteroid series. And the next one's Chiron retrograde, and the Astrology Star Sisters Talk over tea, dwarf planet series in the moon, Mercury retrograde, and the Leo decans. So I look forward to having you come back. And I will be on the Talk Cosmos archetypal symbol team on August 4th at 1 p.m. that you can watch on my YouTube channel. I'd love to see you there. And Simon is going to tell us what she's doing.
So, as you can see here, this refers you to my Patreon page where I talk about astrological transits, both on a semi-daily basis, and then for patrons, I give weekly transit reports and talk about the month ahead as well. And I also do custom astrological art for my patrons, based upon both natal and solar return placements. I am reading tarot and astrology at various shows this summer, which can be found on my website. This weekend is it's the Me Fair in Seaside, Oregon. And next week, I think I'm back in Belltown next week. Again, you can check it out on my website. I have an events page there. So, but I do travel frequently around Washington State and Oregon to shows. So, check me out and see when I'm coming to your area. So, thank you.
And Simon will be back on more episodes to come. And again, to get a hold of Simon, her website is iconalchemy.com, and my website is alightpath.com. And we always love hearing from everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you soon.